Okay, there is an enormous amount of advice about wellness and mental health floating around the place at the moment, but the question of the day is some of it just absolute garbage? My name is Chris Hargraves. This is the Tips for Lawyers podcast, and welcome to this episode. There's a really basic premise, I think, behind the slightly controversial title that I'm probably going to give this particular episode, and that is this. You would not take financial advice from someone who was not financially successful, or at least on the right path financially, nor would you take health advice from someone who was not healthy, or at the very least did not have their health under control, nor would you take advice on how to get fit or how to get strong from someone who was not themselves fit or strong. These are all very basic propositions, and yet in the world of wellness, we have a huge number of voices trying to tell us what we should be doing, how we should be thinking, what styles of work are bad, what styles of work are good. And some of it is coming from sources that are not necessarily very good. I am not going to name any sources, and frankly, I'm not thinking of any one or any place in particular. But what I want to do is get you thinking about how you take advice and where you take it from, and why you might decide that that is a good source of advice for you in your particular circumstances. Because I think that is a more useful question to ask than to try and absorb this mountain, this cacophony of voices that are trying to intrude upon your life to tell you what it is that it will take for you to thrive as a young lawyer. And I guess the main area I wanted to mention and to be aware of is to ideally look at people who, as far as you can tell, are actually thriving in the environment that you want to thrive in. And you might quite rightly look at me in that circumstance, since I don't presently have a full-time practice in the law. I did have a full-time practice in the law for quite a long time, and actually I really enjoyed it and it was awesome. However, you might validly make the decision, Chris has no earthly idea what he's talking about, and therefore I'm not going to take his advice on this particular subject, and that would be fine. In which case, the rest of this series on wellness probably won't be one you tune into, but that's okay. Well, I'm encouraging you to make that decision. I'm encouraging you to decide whether the advice is coming from a source that you are going to find reliable to help you get from A to B to C to D in your career. Because the most regular advisors we tend to hear are not always the kind of people we ought to be taking advice from, not because they're bad or they're not meaning well or anything like that, but because they themselves have not actually thrived in the environment where you want to be. And so taking advice from all sources is not going to be your best bet in those circumstances. What do I mean? I mean, if you are in private practice and you wish to work in full-time private practice and you really enjoy working in a top-tier firm, okay, so you have decided you don't mind the hours, your personal situation allows that to happen, you don't mind the environment, you don't mind the pressure, you don't mind the whatever else comes with a top-tier firm that you have experienced, but you want to thrive and you want to do well and you want to be aware of and maintain your mental health, then taking advice from someone whose solution was to completely leave the top tier environment and go and work one day a week as a greengrocer is probably not going to be that relevant to you, because it doesn't necessarily take into account your circumstances, your desires, or your needs. So what you want to try and find, and I'm not saying this is going to be easy, but I'm saying it's probably worth the effort, is someone who is prepared to mentor you or help you or give you information, who themselves is both in the situation and are the kind of person that you are looking to become. Now, that can be difficult because we don't always know what's going on in someone's personal life. And often we find out after the fact that someone's personal life was a train wreck, whereas they just gave the semblance of having success. That's kind of a difficult question, and I respect the challenges that this exercise is going to offer. The challenge, though, we have is that getting generic advice, and that's sometimes what we get. So from people who don't have the context that we might like them to have, we're going to get advice that is sort of generic and not necessarily able to be implemented in your life, nor sensitive to your particular needs or your particular desires or outcomes. So what you want to be is cautious. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater and just stop reading or listening to everything, but be cautious about what you internalize. Because this is an area in which there are so many voices at the moment, and there are so many available options, that it would be easy for your desire to be protective of your mental health to itself, ironically and disturbingly, cause so much anxiety as you become concerned that you're headed in a bad path, that in fact it's that process that ultimately unspools you. Whereas having someone who aligns more closely with your character, with your desires, with your particular ideals for your career, as they are at the moment, and they might change, but as they are at the moment, might be more helpful for you. In fact, I think it almost certainly will be more helpful for you as you start to explore, okay, how can I build a career that I love? How can I find an area that I love if I don't presently love this one? I really like this, but I'm struggling with 1, 2, and 3. Are there ways to tweak my method of practice or my approach to life or the way I'm doing things or my mental attitude or whatever it might be that are going to assist me in that particular space? Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a tense spot because sometimes the generic advice simply cannot be implemented, and you're going to potentially end up working yourself up into this unnecessary ball of stress as you become concerned about what your future holds. So be careful what advice you take and where it comes from. That includes this advice. Try and understand the context of where the advice is coming from. And like I said, I'm not saying that the advice is always bad, and I'm not saying it's always useless. I'm not saying it's not well-intentioned. I'm not saying it's not well-intentioned. Good double or triple negative there, Chris. You get the idea, though. Just be conscious and deliberate about what you internalize and what you accept, because there is a risk that the advice you're getting is not necessarily right for you if it's not coming contextualized into what you actually need. That's all I had to say. That's all I wanted to caution you about. I think you should give it some thought, and I think you should look around for the right kind of mentors and the right kind of people to have input in your life who have themselves experienced what you're looking to experience and come out the other side both intact and with a positive outcome. I think that is the better place to be getting input. That is all I had, and I'll see you next time.